You're listening to KMRE 102.3 FM in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. Your community, your voice, your station. I'm Matt Benoit, and this is Are You Serious? It's the comedy podcast where comedians get real about some of the darker aspects of their lives and how it affects them both on and off the stage. My guest today is at the Upfront Theater Green Room prior to another gateway show here with Seattle comedian Billy Anderson. You technically don't live in LA, or you do now?
I just moved to LA a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in LA now, although I think since I moved to LA, I've been in the Pacific Northwest more days than I've been in LA. But, you know, it happens.
Please give a very warm welcome to my good friend, Billy Anderson.
Nice. So, you're 30 years old. How long have you been performing for now?
6 years.
6 years?
6 years, yeah. This will be my 6th year as of November 1st.
Cool. Where are you from originally? You're not from around here originally, right?
So I was born in Round Rock, Texas.
Okay.
And I lived in Florida for a few years, and then from age 3 to age 23, essentially, I lived in North Augusta, South Carolina / Augusta, Georgia. They're basically the same place.
All right. And so when did you move to Seattle?
I moved to Seattle roughly 6 years, right around the time I started stand-up, because I started stand-up in Seattle, essentially. I was working for a telecommunications company in Augusta, and I moved to Wichita, Kansas for a better job within that company for like a year and some change. And they're based in Bellevue. They're based out of Bellevue.
Okay.
And so I was going to continue to do my career there. And when I got laid off from that company, I was like, yeah, screw it. I'll just go to Bellevue anyway. I'll go to Seattle anyway, and we'll see what that's all about. And 6 years later, I just focused on comedy, and it's been good.
I went on a date one time, and about halfway through the date, we leave the bar, and we get out in the light, and the girl looks at me, and she goes, you know what? You are cute. Were you fucking arguing with somebody about this? Why'd you accent R in that? That made it not a compliment at all. She goes, no, I'm not saying, like, you're cute, you're just not, like, traditionally good looking. What does that even mean? I don't know what that tradition is, but I'm pretty sure it involves hurting my feelings. Why would you say that? Where's that tradition from? The Democratic People's Republic of you're kind of a dick? What is...
What's the first time you remember seeing stand-up comedy?
Seeing stand-up?
Yeah, or being aware of it in any...
Yeah, I can't think of like an early childhood memory for stand-up. I know that, like, you know, being 30 years old, I sort of came of age right around the time that the Comedy Central Presents were huge. I mean, that was back when Comedy Central wasn't the same network it is today. So producing these Comedy Central Presents were a relatively cheap way for them to make what they thought was like evergreen material. So you can see, like, on the weekends, they would do like a top 30 Comedy Central Presents where you vote, you know, and like they would play the most popular ones, and I would sit there and watch those, and that's when they would play like the early Dane Cook and Nick Swartzen and Mitch Hedberg, all those things that made those comics famous. That was how they built them up. So those are my earliest memories of like getting into stand-up comedy.
So at what point did it ever cross your mind that you could do it, or you wanted to try it?
When I was in high school, I started high school as like an honor student, and then like slowly through like my disillusionment with the system, I started drinking more and partying more and like hanging out with my friends. And then my purpose there was I would get into trouble, but I would also be the one that would be like, what happened last night? And I would tell stories of like what we all got into. I was just the person to do that. And they weren't all that dissimilar to what stand-up is for some people, because I would tell the stories and I'd tell them again, and then you'd add little details, and you'd say, oh, it's actually better if I say this part first, or if I did. So it was like sort of proto-stand-up. And people would always say, I'd tell these stories like, oh, you should do stand-up. That was and I'd be like, I don't know, maybe. And I was in Augusta. There was no stand-up comedy in Augusta, Georgia. There was no place to do it. If I'd been in a place where there was an open mic to do it, I would have done it. But I didn't care enough to be like, oh, yeah, let's drive 2.5 hours to Atlanta to go up and tell a story about how my friend got drunk and threw up on a gal or something. You know, it wasn't accessible, so I didn't do it. But I always wanted to.
So then you moved to Seattle after. Do you graduate from college, or did you?
No, I have a GED.
Okay.
So yeah,
not even high school. Okay.
I mean, it's equivalent.
Yeah.
No, I got into a bunch of trouble, and I was 17 years old, And I wasn't raised with the most money, so I was like, screw this. I'm just going to drop out, get a job, and start worrying about whatever the next chapter of my life's going to be. Because even early on in high school, I didn't really necessarily think college was going to be where I was going to go. I was an artist at the time. I was drawing a lot and like learning design. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to bother with college. Like, a lot of my family went to like technical school and things like that. And I just didn't think that all of the things I enjoyed, I felt like I could do without college. And so when you're 17, you're kind of tired of high school and people that are there, you're like, I'm just going to drop out, get a job, and I'll worry about everything else later. It's what I did.
I like accents in general. They say that babies develop the way they're going to talk most of their young adult life, primarily during the first 6 months they're on Earth, based on the people talking around them. And I think that's amazing, because somebody out there has faked a badass exotic accent around their kid for half a year in order to get a cool kid with an awesome accent. Think of everybody you know. I bet there's someone you know that would do that. Somebody in America has done that, right? Now, I couldn't do it for 2 reasons. 1, don't have a kid. 2, can't do accents, all right? I don't want to fuck my potential kid all up, right? I don't want him to come up to me at the age of 10, finally working up the nerve to ask his old man that question that's always been on his mind, He comes tugging at my shirt sleeve. Father... why do I talk like a this? Nobody else at school talking like this but me, Father. Because I know how I'd react. I'd just look at him and go, I'm sorry, buddy. Daddy got high and was going for Italian. But I didn't really know any Italian people, so I just sort of based it off Mario. Now you know why Mom left, so...
So you moved to this area, and you were, at that point, 24 years old. So where and when did that first stand-up set take place in the Seattle area, and how did it go?
I remember I was driving across country with James Edmonds, who was my long-term roommate at the time, and we were Googling that as we were driving, like, where do we go, what would we do? And I Googled Seattle comedy, and Yogi Paliwal came up as having run a show, and I didn't know any better, so I just shot him a personal email, because his email was there, and I was like, hey, I'm about to move. Where do you think I should go? And he sent me a list of places and was super helpful. I'll never forget that. Super, super helpful. And I went to Comedy Underground. It was the first place I went to. The second place was Odd Duck Theater, which essentially became Eclectic Theater, which is like a 40-spot theater. It was just a very rough open mic. Nobody, even the people involved with it, would say it was probably one of the worst open mics in Seattle for a long time. So I went from like going to an underground and like trying that, and then like Odd Duck Theater, and just getting like polar opposite experiences in Seattle.
So which one went better, the underground or you said the...
I didn't even go up at the other one, because I just looked around and I just like chickened out. But underground went fine. I can't remember having a good set in Seattle for like my first year here. I couldn't tell you a time something went well. I don't think I was very good when I first started, and I was dealing with more than just being a new comic. I was also a young man who'd never really experienced the West Coast or a big city living at all. So I was also adjusting to like truly living on my own. I'd been in Wichita for a year before then, and that was a good trial run, but I always felt like I was pretty close to home if I needed it to be. So I was like truly on my own. I'm 24, which is already a time in your life you're developing a lot. So I think that first year was rough for a lot of reasons, and it certainly wasn't going to get better because I was amazing at comedy.
So right from the start, after you did those, was there much of a gap where you're like, I don't want to do this for a while, or did you kind of just commit to it quite quickly, where you're just like, I'm going to keep just plowing away at this?
Atypically for me, I've never been, I guess, super like, let me commit to that. I didn't even graduate high school, for that matter, But I told myself when I moved, because I had a choice to make, because I worked in that tech company for years before I got laid off, dude. They were trying to do a merger, and the place I was with, they just got rid of the department. And so I said, okay, I can go back home and like try to figure my life back out. Like, what is the next step? Because when you have a GED and you work your way up in a company, and I was a data analyst, so it was like ostensibly a college position, a college graduate position that I had proven myself to be capable of doing and therefore got. And I would tell people, because I was making more money at that time than a lot of the people I came up with, and they're like, well, you did it without a GED, it's great. I go, yeah, but you don't understand. What if this company goes under? What if I get fired for a fuck up? What if I don't get to keep these credentials when I go somewhere else? And so I'd been saying that for years. I'm like, yeah, it's nice, but I'm sort of stuck in this company now. And so when I got laid off, I was like that. I'm like, I'm not going to find a job that pays as well. I'm certainly not going to have the ability to do the position I was doing. Like, I'm going to essentially be starting over. Where am I going to start over at? And I had to choose between just going back home or going to Seattle or anything like that. And so it was really rough, but also like, I told myself that I would give myself 5 years if I was going to make this choice. I was like, there's no point in going out here, spending a bunch of money that you have saved up, going to a new city. If you want to do stand-up, give it 5 years. We all know it's not going to be a one-and-done thing. Nobody's discovered quick. Give it 5 years, and if you suck in 5 years, you'll be 30-ish. You'll be almost 30, and then you can decide to go home and go take a tech class and get a better job and go be a piece of shit for 5 years. And in about 2, I was already further ahead than I put on my limit for the 5 years. And not that I was super far ahead, I just had very low sights for myself. Yeah. And so I said give it 5 and we'll see where it is at the end of 5.
And obviously things have worked out quite well so far. So.
Yeah.
Now you've done, obviously anyone who does this for a duration of time, you end up performing in a lot of weird places. For you, what's one of the weirdest gigs you can think of that you've ever done?
Weirdest?
Yeah. I mean, either worst or weirdest, whichever comes to mind quicker.
Worst, I definitely know. Worst was Andover, Massachusetts. I did a tour right around a year and a half into comedy that I sort of credit with giving me a lot of chops that I wouldn't have, I think, today even without it, which was it was a guy named Morgan Preston, put it all on. He's done it before, and I think he's done it since. A show called 50 Shows in 50 States in 50 Days. We did it in 48, so we were all over the country. Wow. And I was doing 15 minutes opening up a show every night. And they were some of them were great and a lot of them weren't, because you're doing Tuesdays in some weird border city. Like, why would they be good? We did Andover, Massachusetts, and it was the worst show I've ever done. It's like 3 days after Halloween. Halloween was on like a Thursday or Wednesday that year, and so it was like a Friday or a Saturday. I can't remember which. Everybody was still wearing their costumes after Halloween. You'd think they would have done it the weekend before, but they're all in their, like, it was like half costumes, half people just trying to drink. We had our show, and I don't know if you guys, if anybody listened to this or if you've ever gone to traveled for a show and you get to the bar you're supposed to be doing the show at, and there's like no show posters, nothing seems to be set up for comedy. It's just like, it's like slow, ominous horror music starts to play where you're like, do they know we're supposed to be doing this? So we get there, and the guy who owns the bar, I guess, was just like a general fan of stand-up, and we cold called him to try to figure out this 50 State thing. So he's like, oh yeah, we can do it. Oh, there's a karaoke guy coming up soon. We had him come in an hour early. You'll just use his sound system. He'll set up for karaoke. You guys will do your thing. Then they'll do karaoke. So like, we are just the most afterthought-ish of afterthoughts. Yeah. So everybody's like having it's like pretty packed of like people who don't know that there's about to be a comedy show. So the guy comes up, he's like, everybody, there's gonna be a show. And it might as well have been like, everybody, my cousin Timothy plays the recorder. And if you could listen to him, that'd be great. So everybody's like, oh. So they set up the chairs. There's one table that wants to do it. Mostly people who don't, who are sort of annoyed that they got kicked out of the room. And there's a dude wearing like an Affliction t-shirt and like big roided up muscles, sits front row center. So I go up and I try to do my jokes. I'm not super great at that point, but I'd been doing it for 30 days straight, so I felt confident. And then he spent all of my set being like, Boston, tell jokes about Boston, which we are not even in. And it just derailed me, and I thought like I was like trying to I was just kind of yelling at him, hoping maybe he would punch me in the face and I can get off stage. He never did. And of course, anybody who's done comedy or knows enough about comedy knows that after the show, he came up to me and goes, oh, you were great. I'm like, fuck you. How dare you?
Heckle me.
But the best part is we had to record everything for Guinness. And so we go back, and this woman was walking in front of the camera in a full witch outfit appropriately, and was just like, "Why are you doing this to us? We just want to have a good time. This is horrible." It was very humbling.
The people in Andover sound like they're on The Simpsons.
I hate them. I'll never go back. Garbage town full of garbage people. Put it on the record.
Okay, there you go.
Speaking of sea turtles, you can swim with sea turtles in Hawaii. I had no idea about that, right? They don't put that on the pamphlet, you know? But it was cool. It was majestic and it was amazing, and they would just swim by. And then when I got out, I kind of got it all ruined for me because there was a sign, and the sign read simply, "Please do not touch or ride the sea turtles." You guys know that sign probably used to just read, "Please do not touch the sea turtles." Oh, and we made them get more specific, didn't we? Just some guy who looks like me arguing with his wife on the beach like, "No, Camille, if God didn't want us to ride him, why'd he build those badass saddles on their backs, Sam?" Yeah, checkmate, Camille. I'm going to be a sea cowboy and you can't stop me this time. My favorite thing about that sign is people from all over the world vacation in Hawaii, but that sign was only written in English. It's just for us, America. It's for us and like 3 shitty Canadians. That's it. We're the only people in the world that would go down to the beach on vacation, look an endangered animal in the eyes and go, "Hey! I'm gonna ride the shit out of you. There's nothing you can do about it." If they didn't want me to do it, they'd put up a goddamn sign. "Come here and let me tame you."
Now, although it could be considered a stereotype, there's certainly truth that a lot of comedians deal with a lot of mental darkness, whether that be anxiety, depression, or thoughts or even attempts of suicide. And October 23rd of 2015, you were affected by that darkness when your roommate and fellow Seattle comedian Meredith Flanders killed herself in the apartment that you shared. You found her body 2 days later, and she was actually scheduled to be the featured comedian, appear in Bellingham at the Green Frog the following Monday.
I didn't know that till you told me that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people had given me anecdotes about that, a lot of things that would imply that they didn't see it coming, and I didn't know that she had a booking the next day.
Yeah, it was, I just remember seeing, everything on Facebook, and just everyone was super bummed out and sad about it. I don't remember if anyone brought it up. We might have said something, a tribute to her, the reason why we don't have a feature at the end, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But everyone just did their time and tried to not dwell on it.
Yeah.
But obviously that was of great impact in your life. Yeah. So first of all, just how shocking was it to find your friend and roommate had committed suicide? And I guess what was the immediate aftermath for you, finding her and then just processing what had just happened?
I wrote about it a little this week, and one of the things I focused on is how little we saw it coming, and based on her own note, she even said herself, she was like, when I woke up this morning, I didn't expect this was going to be a day where I'd kill myself. So it was definitely not seen coming. Shocking to say the least. I mean, we lived together for a long time, always friends, and there was like a chicken store down the road, and anytime one of us would go to get chicken, we'd get the other one chicken, so I just went and got her some food when I went to get myself some food. And I'm knocking on the door. I had people message me like, "Hey, have you heard from Meredith? We haven't heard from Meredith." And I'm like, "She's probably sleeping. She's sick, whatever, So I knocked on the door, and I'm pretty sure I was like, "Wake up, hooker," or whatever, Like how you talk to your friends.
Yeah.
Like, "Wake up, slut. I got chicken for you, hooker." And I'm like nagging on the door, and I try to open it, and it's stuck the way old houses that have layers of paint get stuck. And I remember sort of pushed the door open, and I saw her like laying on the ottoman that we had in our living room, and I saw her legs, and I thought, "Oh, Meredith's been drunk. She's like passed out and drunk. Get your life together, Meredith," I thought. And then my eyes keep scrolling. And then I see like she's like face down on the thing, and I was like, "Oh my God, maybe she is sick." Other people had said, "Oh, she wasn't feeling well. Maybe can you check on her?" I was like, "Oh no, she's sick." In that way that your brain thinks very quickly. And then I saw that there was a belt tied around her neck, and I've never experienced anything like it since, and never anything before. But the best thing I can describe it is it was like sirens going off in my head. There's a movie 28 Days Later does it, where they do a soundtrack, and it's all like as things get intense, like this wail starts to occur and kind of takes over all of the noise in the scene. And that's kind of how I felt, because it was like I have a pretty consistent inner narrator in my head, especially with my ADD, just kind of constantly chattering even more than I talk anyway. And it was all gone. I felt like I was in panic mode, and I ran and grabbed my phone and dialed 911, and I was almost like it was shock, it was a true shock, medical shock. And I don't remember thinking a whole lot. I remember just being present. And again, to this day, I've never experienced anything like it, and I didn't experience anything like it before. But yeah, that's the best way I can describe it.
And of course, the EMTs did come. They pronounced her dead, and you.
Yes.
At that point, obviously, I'm sure, as with any suicide, whoever discovers gets questioned by the police. Just for.
You know what's funny is it never even dawned on me that they were questioning me as if I had something to do with it. I told my dad this recently because he was calling asking me how I was feeling on the anniversary, and I don't know if I'd ever told him this, but I was talking with him later that day. I called to let him know what was going on, and maybe it was the next day. I can't remember, but he goes, "Well, at least they didn't think you did it." And it literally, again, never before, never after. It took me off my feet. I sat down and went, "Oh my God." He goes, "What?" He goes, "I just never even considered that they would like." You think, oh, this is so horrible, and then you think, well, there's a way it could have been way worse. Yeah. Like, let's say she hadn't left a note, or anything like that. I never even considered it. Now, if you ask me, Billy, of course they would consider it. Like somebody's suicide, you have to. Somebody finds them, you can't just take their word. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I'd never even considered it. In retrospect, yeah, they had like a police person stationed, not next to me, but like always within eye, like make sure I don't bolt.
Yeah.
Like, in retrospect, that's exactly what they were doing. But in the moment, I had no idea that was what it was. And luckily, none of them made me feel like someone who had, that was being questioned like a perp or anything. Yeah. Like, I would say that all the people, I know Seattle PD doesn't always get a good rap, but I would say, as far as I'm concerned, they treated me with a lot of respect, and despite the fact that they had to consider me someone that could have done it, they certainly didn't. I never felt like they were doing that. So
yeah, probably just doing the basic stuff.
The protocol,
that they have to do.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I think if they had found something suspicious, they would have piqued their interest very quickly. But
which fair. Yeah, it just had never dawned on me. I laugh about it to this day where I'm like, what a dummy. Of course. Of course they would. But in the moment, it just never even crossed my mind.
One of my good friends, he did some work for a guy. He was remodeling a guy's bathroom and shows up on Christmas Eve and, finds his boss, quote unquote, slept over on the couch. He shot himself. And, so of course calls the police and they come and, but they just ask you the basic questions and that was that. But for you, what were the days after that? I mean,
I don't really remember much. I drank a lot. I am not a drinker when I'm sad. Like, I don't go like, oh, you're in a bad mood, let's drink it away. I've never been that guy. In my memory, even though it's not true, but this is how I choose to remember it, is that everybody's just like, here, drink this. You know what I mean? Like, here, be wasted. Even though that wasn't the case. Yeah. I was just around people. And I think people, when they have large groups of people together mourning, they provide alcohol if people need it. And I was always around that. People were always around me. Because, again, even though I've never been depressed or suicidal, I think people wanted to be around me at all times to make sure I wasn't going to go jump off a bridge, as is something that happens. But I remember getting blackout drunk that night when we went to Jai Tai to sort of collectively mourn. I don't even remember where I woke up. I remember having to go back to the house and start to gather things up. I remember having to plan. I think I almost immediately went into planning the memorial service at Jai Tai, because one thing I felt like I was okay at is putting on a show, and that's essentially what we were doing, is make an event, put on this thing, get people together, and it gave me something to do. And I mean, it was important for me to do that. So the worst thing was, I had just been I'd been working a day job-ish, and I'd been out of work for a little bit. And at that time, that was before, it was 2 years, in the last 2 years since Meredith passed, I've gotten a lot more financially stable. But at that time, I very much wasn't. And I was like, oh, yeesh, what am I going to do? If I got to move out, I'm going to have to pay a deposit somewhere. Like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to have to stay there, but I had pretty bad PTSD about the house.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of me just trying to work through my feelings and everybody being very polite to me while I did that for the most part for that week.
Did you ever think about taking a break from comedy or walking away from it in the aftermath of that?
Like leaving comedy?
Yeah, just stop doing it, or at least take maybe like, I'm not going to do anything for a month or something.
Never even crossed my mind.
Really?
Never. The only thing I thought was, will I have to go back home? I was really concerned about the idea of being emotionally destroyed, financially destitute,
Yeah, you don't
and
have a roommate
having no
anymore.
options.
Right.
And having to go back home either due to like emotionally having to recover or just because I can't afford to live here anymore. And that was worrying me because I thought, oh, if I do that, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be a comic in the way that I am here. It didn't end up being that way. But no, I was 2 weeks after she died. I mean, I would say that week I wasn't going to open mics and stuff. I probably took a week and a half off, which at that time I had never since I started taken a week and a half off. But I mean, I feel like our scene in a lot of ways took a week and a half off of stand-up. But no, I had a Gateway show like November 2nd. So I think I basically took a week and a half, 2 weeks off. Out of like also just like I didn't have the time. I was like moving things around and stuff. But no, like.
Do you think that continuing to do comedy in that was do you think it had some sort of cathartic effect for you, or do you feel like it was almost more just like, I'm too busy, I'm gonna repress how I feel?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think like I had a bunch of obligations, and I think getting rid of my obligations would have made me feel like a piece of shit. It would have made me be like, oh God, you can't handle your shit. Like people suffer. Like go do your obligations. I think I probably should have taken more self-care time. I should have probably gone and seen a therapist, which I still have never done. I should have. I've talked with people since then, like essentially therapy, but I should have gone and gotten a therapist. The government will pay for like apparently like the first few of them if you're in a crisis situation. I should have gone and done that. I did not. And that's the only thing I would change is I would have slowed down a little bit on diving right back into work and would have probably, if I broke my leg, I wouldn't have slumped it and drug it across the stage for comedy. And I think emotionally I was a little broken and probably could have stood. I think I healed a little weird for a while because of that. And it affected relationships with people because I had this like poorly set broken leg of an emotional situation going on and did not properly handle it.
So one other thing I wanted to touch on that you'd mentioned on Facebook in your week of posts about this being the 2-year anniversary is that Meredith did leave a note, as you said earlier, about kind of why she did what she did, and the main reason was because she had an incurable condition, a chronic medical condition called endometriosis. Is that what it's called?
Endometriosis, that's right.
So what can you tell me about that? I mean, I'd never heard of the condition before I saw your post.
Endometriosis is when your uterine lining starts to grow outside of where it should. It's super painful and very hard to diagnose. And what I've since learned, and I don't feel like an expert on this, when I posted it, I specifically posted what I have learned, which is, I mean, even with all the reading I've done, without firsthand knowledge, there's not much I can say that isn't like just me quoting a fact. And that's why when I posted it, I tried to post like articles from women about how it's affected their life. But it feels a lot like a hernia, I'm told. It's and it doesn't go away. You can do surgery to get rid of the growths that are there, but more will come. Sometimes they get worse with age. So you look at it and some people, it gets better. This is the opposite. People get full hysterectomies to remove it altogether, which is pretty intense for a woman. You know what I mean? All I can say is if you're listening to this and you don't know what endometriosis is, do the women in your life a favor if you're a guy and read about it. And realize that it's one of the many ways women get a bad shake in this world, in that like there've been a lot of studies, doctors do not believe female pain as much as men. And so if you take them to a doctor, sometimes maybe majority of which tend to be men, and you go, I have this problem, I have painful periods, and they go, yeah, well, all women have painful periods, that's what a period is. And you go, no, mine's worse. And they go, how could you know that?
Right.
And they ignore them, and they go, well, I need some sort of help. And they go, you're just looking for drugs. Imagine how that would feel if you had the equivalent of a constant migraine. Nobody believed you when you said it, and when you went for help, they accused you of being a drug addict. And realize that that happens to roughly 10% of women across the world. And yeah, I guess it may be a tropey thing to say, but believe women.
So 2 years after this whole thing happened to you and the people around you, how do you think that this event, Meredith's suicide, has affected you in a person in any way you can, I guess, describe, or the way you, I guess, just the way you perceive life and where you are in it?
I talked about it when I was writing all my stuff, but the biggest thing was, I would say it was especially hard for me because as a dude in America, which even though I was raised not super rich, you could, as a young dude, you can go well into your 30s without experiencing a trauma. Our grandparents and parents live much longer than they used to. I'd never experienced a close person dying.
Wow.
The closest I'd had was about 6 months before Meredith died, an old flame. I looked her up on Facebook, and everybody's like, "We miss you, Nikki," and I'm like, "Where'd Nikki move?"
Yeah.
Well, apparently to the great beyond, because she had died.
Wow.
And I felt a lot. It hit me really hard because I was like, "Wow." You kind of take for granted people are going to be there. But that was the closest thing I had, and me and her were not super close. So I hadn't had a close family member die, anything. And so I would say dealing with that trauma allowed me to have more empathy for people who dealt with trauma all their lives, because it was especially hard for me because I had no knowledge of how to heal from that. And it made me realize probably how many people in this country, maybe some of their lack of empathy is because we have it so good in this country, people just can't relate to the bad things that happen all too often. Mm-hmm. So I would say, I said it in the post, not in a bad way, but I could remember before Meredith died in my adult life maybe 5 times crying.
Wow.
And I think since Meredith died, it seems like those floodgates were open. I cry all the time, out of good things, bad things, sad things. Stuff hits me weird, So
you think it's maybe somehow unleashed, I guess you talk about empathy, maybe you're more empathetic? I
think 100% I'm more empathetic. I mean, I wrote about it, but there's this tribe in Brazil where they make young men, as a rite of passage, put their hand into essentially a glove full of these things called bullet ants, which are like one of the most painful stings. Like they call them bullet ants because they compare it to getting shot.
Holy crap.
And it's like 400 bullet ant stingers out, and you put your hand in. And in order to become a man in their society, you have to do this not once, but 20 times. And the idea is you should have to deal with something horrible, so that way when other people talk about horrible things, you can be like, it's like those fucking bullet ants, dude. Yeah. I relate to you, Yeah. I've dealt with something so traumatic it makes me cry thinking about it. And therefore, maybe you're not as quick to do things that would cause that trauma to people, or you're not as quick to dismiss other people's trauma. And I kind of look at that as this is the closest thing I've ever had to a glove full of bullet ants, is dealing with this. It just makes me much quicker to sympathize.
I like being here. I like Seattle in general. Although I do feel like everybody here individually smokes more pot than any group of people I knew in Georgia, right? I like it. Like I was dating a girl recently. She smoked all the time, even when we had sex. And do any of you monsters do that? Yeah, because I don't know how you do that. The moment I smoke pot, I lose track of everything I do. I can't have sex. I tried it one time. One time I got high before I had sex. Halfway through, the girl was like, hey, baby, what are you thinking about? And I'm just like, hey, do you think that regular dogs ever get upset with police dogs for only solving human crimes?
We are here at the Upfront prior to Gateway Show. How did the Gateway Show get started? And just tell me about how it's growing.
Gateway Show started, it goes all the way back to like my first year in stand-up comedy. I wanted to produce a show. And we went to a venue called the Chieftain, which is right down the road from my house. And it was me and Aaron Kirby. And we put on a show called Comedy on Trial, which is a long-standing comedy competition in Seattle. And we did it at the Chieftain. Chieftain would either be amazing or horrible. It was a college bar for Seattle Central Seattle College, something like that. It's the like Christian law school or something. But it was right there, and so some nights when it was slow and we brought the people in, it would be amazing. Some nights when it was busy and it was a bunch of college kids who didn't give a shit about what we were doing, it was horrible. And eventually I remember we brought like a comic in from out of town, and we paid him to be there, and then he was embarrassed by how bad it was, and I was just like, I'm never going back to this place. And at that time I'd been working at Jai Thai a bunch, and I really loved the space, and I mentioned it to Rick Taylor, who ran it, And he goes, well, you should bring it here. And so for about a year and a half, maybe a little longer than that, we did Comedy on Trial there every Saturday. It was every week, every Saturday. And eventually, after a while, I was like, I would like to do other types of shows. What if we took Comedy on Trial, made it once a month, and we did 3 other shows in that space? And we sat down, it was Erin Engel and I and a couple other people, but mostly Erin Engel and me, because she was the other person who was going to do it with me. And we were brainstorming ideas, and we came up with the idea, like they'd been doing a drunk show at Tacoma Comedy Club where comics tell jokes, get drunk, go back up. And I was like, we should do this with pot, which they had tried once with edibles with no success. So, and the idea of a show where you do tell jokes, you do something, you go back up, had been around for a while. And so I don't want to take credit for that, but I will say that we came up with the exact format we do and the exact way we do it. We came up with that. And we certainly, on the West Coast, bar none, have been the most popular creators of that format.
Yeah, because now the Gateway Show has both a national and local marijuana-related sponsors.
Yes, and we're in 3 cities in Washington, 2 cities in Oregon, 6 cities in California, 2 cities in Nevada, and by 2018, all of those will be monthly if they're not already. It's the biggest pot-themed comedy show in the United States, no doubt. Yeah. Certainly the biggest before and after style comedy show in the United States, and one of the few widespread touring comedy showcases, period. And that is the beginning and end of the credit I will give myself for it. Anything beyond that, I can't take credit for.
But this has allowed you to effectively make a living as a stand-up comedian, has it not?
Yes, in very upper lower class levels. You know what I mean? The tippy top of lower class. But I'm making enough to eat, and I'm making enough to pay rent, and that's the point of it. And it's starting to get better, but mostly it's about, we mostly dump most of the money we make back into the show to try to continue to grow it.
So at this point, you are effectively, you don't have a day job. Your day job is comedy, if you want to say that, day and night job. So what are your ultimate goals with stand-up? Where would you ultimately like to see yourself a few years
Well, I'm in a weird place right now because I just moved to LA and I'm trying to figure out where my path is going to take me. I like producing shows. I think I'm going to continue to produce shows. They ask you, what do you want to do? You want to be a writer? You want to do? I would love to be like a showrunner. I would love to produce a show and put it on, or be a writer on a show that I have a hand in the path it takes. Would be my ideal goal, is to come up with a show that we can do and do it that way. Like if the Gateway Show became a show or something like that. Right. Like even something small. Yeah. Would be just to be able to continue to create and be creative would be my goal. I doubt I'm going to be as much of an on-screen person. I'd love to continue to do stand-up, but the reality when you want to be a Kyle Kinane or a Dave Chappelle, those people have to not only be motivated, successful, they also have to be the best stand-up comedians, period. And they're not going to be pulled away to write as much. They're going to focus on stand-up. And I would love, if I continue my career, for that to maybe be the case. I would imagine my love of the work behind the scenes will probably lead me elsewhere, but I'm just sort of figuring it out. I love stand-up. I don't think I'm ever going to stop doing stand-up no matter what happens. So I just want to continue to live a life where I can be creative and nobody is stifling my creativity because of money. Yeah. If I never did anything more than what I'm doing right now, I don't think I would be disappointed in my life. I think I'm already, if you told me when I was 18 that by the time you're 30, you're going to be traveling around producing a show, especially if I was where people get stoned and tell jokes, but you're going to make enough money to be able to travel around, visit new cities, meet new people, tell jokes, have a special release, we work on an album, I'd be like, dope, where do I sign up? How can I start that today? And so, I don't know. I come from working class background, so I don't mind continuing to work. I don't need $100,000 in the bank to retire on one day, I guess, or whatever. I'm fine with working.
Still living with a girl. It's and like I said, we're not dating in any way. We've always just been friends, nothing romantic. So it does make living in a 2-person house kind of weird. The other day she went to a bar, she picked up a dude. That guy came back to our house, stayed the night, and then the next morning all 3 of us found ourselves eating breakfast together. And let me tell you right now, that guy was concerned. He had no idea what was going on, right? So I think I'm charming. I figure I can lighten the mood. I look at the guy. I'm like, come on, man. We're both adults. Are we seriously going to sit here eating eggs and not talk about the fact that you fucked my wife in our house last night? Then I just threw my eggs at the wall and walked out of the room. You know what I mean? What else can you do? You know? The best part about that is I could do that to any guy she brings home, right? What's she gonna do, warn the next dude? I don't think that's gonna work out how she thinks it will. She's gonna be all like, hey, listen, before I invite you up, I gotta let you know. I gotta let you know, I live with this guy, and he's gonna say he's my husband.
Just a couple quick bonus questions I like to ask every comic. First off, what's the closest you've ever personally come to dying?
Right after Meredith passed away, I think the depression kind of fucked up my immune system, and I had some like random disease. They weren't sure what it was. They think it was shingles, is what they think it was now. But I'd already been losing weight at the time, and I think I dropped another 25 pounds in like a month after I'd already lost a bunch of weight. So it was a pretty significant percentage of my weight. And I remember I was laying in bed, and Aaron Engel, who was eventually my roommate as well, came to me and was like, Billy, like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, they're working on it. I don't want to talk about it. And they're like, listen, like, is it cancer? Are you okay? Like, and that's when I realized, I'm like, I must look horrible.
Yeah.
Because I was sleeping 16 hours a day. I remember I had a gig, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I was just so sick. And I finally got up, and I was up for like an hour, and I was feeling dizzy. I did the show. I almost fell off stage.
Wow.
Went back home, slept. I remember crying, being like, am I going to die? I had no idea, and they still don't know what was wrong with me. I got better. I took a bunch of stuff for shingles, and so it probably was. And I read about it, and apparently that stuff can hit you like a ton of bricks.
Wow. Yeah, I had chickenpox when I was young, so it's hopefully I won't.
Well, that's why they say for you to get chickenpox because you get when you're adult. I did get chickenpox when I was young, and I still got shingles, which I guess fuck me, I guess.
Yeah.
But like,
wow.
I don't know. They still don't know. I take some medicine because, at the end of this year, after 2 years, I'm gonna go to my doctor and be like, should we pull back from it? But I was so sick. So yeah, and then I've been like, and when I was in Augusta, where there's a lot more crime, I remember some people beat the shit out of me one time, and then a dude pulled a gun on me, and there's an alternate reality where I like talked shit and got shot there. But other than that, honestly, I've lived a pretty safe life.
Okay, and the final question is, I love this because it can be rational or irrational. What do you fear most in life?
Shit, that's heavy.
It is.
What do I fear most in life? I don't like heights. Okay. Heights skis me out. And I think it's because I was just fat and uncoordinated for so long. So like when you walk down a path and there's not a little gate next to it, even though you're like, I'm so far away from that and there's so much to grab on, I just have very clear fantasies of just like falling down it, like tripping over a rock and then just tumbling. And then like, it must suck to fall off a cliff because you're there. And you're like, fuck, I'm falling down this cliff. And every time you take a hit, you're like, ow, you know? Because I've been in near-death situations and like shit slows down.
Yeah.
And you just like, to fall down a cliff where it would take you like 25 seconds to fall down it, and you're like hitting and breaking bones and shit, and you're just like, there's no, like, at the end of this, I'm just going to hit the ground, and that's even worse, you know? That must suck. I hate that. I fear that.
Okay.
Falling off a cliff.
That is a totally fair answer. And with that, I think we're just about done, Billy, but thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks for having me, man.
My thanks to Billy Anderson for being on the program. If you'd like to contact us, you can message us or comment on the Are You Serious Facebook page. We'll be back again soon with another installment, but until then, I'm Matt Benoit for Are You Serious? Keep it right here for more great local programming on KMRE 102.3 FM, Bellingham.
When the lights get low